In the quiet suburban streets of Maplewood, 59-year-old Martha Johnson stood in front of a mirror. Her white hair was neatly tied back, and her black dress was well ironed. Sighing deeply, she looked out the window. A short drive to Greenwood Cemetery awaited her. Today was the anniversary of her daughter Rebecca's death. 3 years ago, Rebecca passed away at the age of 34. Martha took a bouquet of white lilies from a vase and held them close to her chest. They were Rebecca's favorite flowers. "Has it really been 3 years?" Martha murmured. "It feels like just yesterday." Martha got into her car and drove the familiar road. The trees began to show signs of autumn. She remembered walking here with Rebecca, her daughter's laughter echoing as if it was just yesterday. As she neared her destination, Martha felt a tightening grip on the steering wheel. Each memory of that day still constricted her heart. 3 years ago, Rebecca had gone to work as usual and never returned. Initially, Martha waited without worry, assuming her daughter was working late. However, as the night grew later, there was no contact from Rebecca. Phone calls only reached her voicemail. When she started to feel that something was off, she was notified that Rebecca's car had been found on a deserted road in the suburbs. The doors were open, and the keys were still in the ignition. But there was no sign of Rebecca. For weeks, Martha desperately searched for her daughter. She frequented the police station, spoke with Rebecca's colleagues, and visited all the places her daughter might have gone. But there were no traces of Rebecca. Then, late one night, a call came from an unknown number. "Is this Martha Johnson?" a man's voice asked over the phone. "I work for a private accident management company, and I'm sorry to bring sad news about your daughter, Rebecca." According to him, a severely damaged car was found at the base of a cliff, and DNA tests confirmed Rebecca's death. "Her body is being kept at a local funeral home," the man continued. "However, the condition of the body is quite severe, and viewing might be difficult." Martha listened to the explanation amidst profound grief. However, something felt off. Why was a private company contacting her instead of the police? Why the rush to proceed with the arrangements? Despite her immense sorrow, Martha lacked the mental strength to question further at that time. Days later, she was guided to a local funeral home, where a prepared coffin awaited her. Stunned, she could only stand in front of the sealed coffin, which she was not allowed to open. Finally, she was led to a section of Greenwood Cemetery. There stood a tombstone engraved with beloved daughter Rebecca Johnson. The rapid developments overwhelmed Martha. She couldn't even say her final goodbye to her daughter, only left with a sealed coffin and a cold tombstone as proofs of Rebecca's existence. "I always felt something was wrong," Martha thought. The series of unnatural events, a funeral pushed forward without proper police investigation, and a body she was never allowed to see. However, these doubts were buried deep within her grief and never took a clear form. Staring into the rearview mirror, Martha sighed deeply. The unease she had always felt was now starting to make sense. The inconsistencies she had overlooked in her grief were now forming significant doubts in her mind. As she arrived at the cemetery, Martha slowly walked along the path lined with tombstones. Approaching Rebecca's grave, she exclaimed in surprise. A little boy was crying in front of the tombstone. Martha approached him gently and asked, "Hello, are you okay?" The boy looked up with tear-stained eyes and seemed to be about 9 years old. "This is my mom's grave," the boy said. "But the name is different." Martha was confused. She looked at the tombstone, clearly engraved with Rebecca Johnson. "Oh, what does that mean?" Martha asked gently. "Your name?" "My name's Justin. Justin Carter," the boy replied. At that moment, a middle-aged man hurriedly approached. "Justin. There you were?" the man said. Martha stood up and turned to the man. "Hello. Are you this boy's father?" The man nodded. "Yes, I'm Jason Carter. I apologize if my son has been a bother." Martha shook her head. "No, not at all. But he seems confused about this grave. Can we talk about it? Jason looked anxiously at the tombstone. Honestly, I'm not sure either. I was told my late wife Amy was buried here. Martha took a deep breath. My daughter Rebecca also passed away exactly 3 years ago. And this is her tombstone. Jason's expression froze. 3 years ago, he said with a trembling voice. Amy also. I was told she died 3 years ago. What do you mean? Martha gasped, and as she explained the circumstances surrounding Rebecca's death, Jason's expression turned to one of shock. I received a similar call. He continued. His eyes reflected the pain of unforgettable memories. A man claiming to work for a private accident management company told me that Amy had been in an accident. Martha's heart began to race. And the body was? I couldn't see it. Jason slowly formed his words, as if matching them to his memories. The coffin was sealed. They told me the body was too damaged. Jason paused for a moment and sighed deeply. But what puzzled me the most was this tombstone. Amy's name isn't on it. I thought it was strange, so I immediately tried to contact the accident management company. And? Martha leaned in and asked. The company had vanished. Jason's voice conveyed his confusion and helplessness at the time. The phone number was no longer in use, and when I visited the address, there was no record of such a company ever existing. I consulted with the police, but no official death certificate was found. It's like groping in the fog. Martha continued the conversation. Yes. I tried to uncover the truth for Justin's sake, but all leads had disappeared. This tombstone was the only thing that remained as evidence of Amy's fate. But even her name isn't engraved on it. The same is true for me. Martha covered her mouth with her hand. I've never seen Rebecca's body either. Just a sudden phone call, and then a few days later, a sealed coffin and this tombstone. The two looked at each other, reading the confusion and doubts that mirrored their own. Such similar circumstances and the disappearance of all evidence. Why are they so similar? And why are both of us in the same cemetery, with one of the tombstones even missing a name? Jason's words faltered. I've tried to investigate many times. But all leads disappear, and no one has any answers. Justin believes this is where his mom rests. Martha said thoughtfully of the little boy. Yes. I've felt the need to know the truth for my son's sake, but there was nothing I could do. Regret and a sense of powerlessness seeped through Jason's voice. At that moment, the same suspicions sprouted in their minds. This was not mere coincidence. Deliberately erased traces, remaining mysteries. Perhaps some large, organized force was at work. Jason, we need to investigate this. The doubts you've carried alone, and what happened to our daughters, we need to know the truth. Martha said with determination, and Jason nodded firmly. Yes, we do. With so many similarities, and the evidence so thoroughly erased. It's too unnatural. Martha added. Alone, I was at a dead end, but together. Standing by the tombstone, they made a silent vow. No matter what the truth might be, they must uncover it. It was their responsibility to the loved ones they cherished and to Justin. This shared discovery and the sharing of long-held doubts would lead them to the first steps of a new inquiry, though they did not yet know it. That day, in the silence of the cemetery, the fates of two families intersected. Unknown to them, the journey they were about to embark on would forever change their lives. The next day, Martha welcomed Jason and Justin into her living room. Old albums and documents were spread out on the coffee table. This is Rebecca, Martha pointed to a photo of a smiling young woman. She worked as a copywriter at an advertising agency. She was very creative, always finding words that touched people's hearts. Jason gazed at the photo and nodded. Amy was also in a creative profession. She was a freelance graphic designer. Justin peered curiously at the photo. Can I show a picture of my mom? Jason smiled at his son and pulled out his smartphone. a photo of a woman with a bright smile appeared. Martha gasped upon seeing it. My, she looks just like Rebecca. Indeed, the two women bore a striking resemblance to each other, similar hair color, eye shape, and smiles. Yet, they were not the same person. Martha pondered deeply. Is this just a coincidence, or? At that moment, the doorbell rang. Martha stood up and opened the door. A man in his mid-40s stood there, dressed in a gray suit, with sharp eyes. I'm Michael Brown, the man introduced himself. Martha called me. Martha welcomed him inside. She had contacted Michael, a detective she knew from before, to consult on this matter just yesterday. Thank you, Michael. Please, come this way. As they entered the living room, Michael greeted Jason and Justin. Once everyone was seated, Martha began to explain the situation. Michael listened attentively, occasionally taking notes. When Martha finished, he looked serious and said, "This is a very unusual situation. A thorough investigation will be necessary." Jason asked anxiously, "How will we proceed?" Michael began to outline the plan. First, we'll check the cemetery records. Then, we need to gather as much information as possible about the last days of Rebecca and Amy. This includes talking to coworkers, friends, and anyone who saw them last. Martha and Jason agreed and promised to cooperate as much as possible. Justin had been quietly listening, but suddenly he spoke up. I actually have Mom's diary. The adults looked at him in surprise. Justin, why didn't you say anything before? Jason asked. Justin shrugged. It was a keepsake of Mom's, and I wanted to keep it just between Mom and me. But maybe it could be helpful. Michael smiled gently at Justin. That diary could be very important. Thank you for the wonderful find, Justin. That afternoon, Michael began his investigation. Martha and Jason provided as much information as they could about Rebecca and Amy, including photos, letters, and work documents, as well as Amy's diary that Justin had treasured. Late that night, Michael returned to Martha's house to report his initial findings. There are certainly discrepancies in the cemetery records. There's a burial record for Rebecca, but none for Amy. Interestingly, there are also some questionable points on Rebecca's death certificate. Martha gasped. What do you mean? Michael chose his words carefully. The cause of death is listed as a traffic accident, but the details are vague. No accident report was found. Jason frowned. I was told Amy died in a traffic accident too, but I never knew the details. Michael nodded. Going forward, I'll conduct a thorough investigation into both accidents. I will also track the last days of Rebecca and Amy. Martha looked out the window at the moon in the night sky and murmured, Rebecca, what happened to you? Jason silently hugged Justin. The little boy, not fully understanding the adult conversation, fell asleep in his father's arms. Michael stood up and got ready to leave. I will start a full investigation tomorrow. I'll inform you immediately if anything new comes to light. Martha and Jason saw him off. Neither could imagine how this journey would change their lives. The path to the truth was more twisted and dangerous than expected. Weeks passed, and Michael's investigation deepened. He interviewed Rebecca and Amy's colleagues and friends, gradually gathering information about the women's final days. One day, Michael made a significant report at Martha's house, with Jason also present. Both Rebecca and Amy had been acting differently in the last few weeks, Michael began. Their colleagues said they often received phone calls and stepped aside to talk in whispers. Martha asked anxiously, What does that mean? Michael chose his words carefully. I can't say for certain yet, but it's possible that the two were involved in some secret activities. And that might be related to their disappearances, or even their deaths. Jason grimaced. I can't believe Amy would be involved in anything illegal. She was a very honest person. Martha agreed. Rebecca was the same. She always tried to do the right thing. I think you're right. However, even good people can unknowingly get caught up in dangerous situations, especially when trying to protect someone they care about. Martha and Jason fell silent, and Michael added, "There's another concerning point. Recently, illegal activities have been reported near the last place Rebecca and Amy were seen. Specifically, dealings in forged documents and identification." Martha inhaled sharply, and Jason was visibly disturbed. "I can't believe Rebecca would be involved in something like that. Amy too, but why? It's still speculative, but they might have needed to hide their identities for some reason. And that may have led to their deaths." A heavy silence fell in the room as Martha and Jason tried to digest this new information. Suddenly, Michael's cell phone rang. He answered, and after a brief conversation, his expression changed dramatically as he ended the call. "What happened?" Martha asked with concern. Michael responded with a grave look. "I just received a call from my informant. There's going to be significant activity tonight near the last place where Rebecca and Amy were seen. This could be our chance." Jason stood up determinedly. "Let's go. We need to know the truth." "I'm coming too." Michael looked at them, acknowledging their resolve. "Understood. But be aware, this could be dangerous. We need to be extremely cautious." That night, Martha, Jason, and Michael headed to an old industrial area in New York City. As they drove through the dimly lit streets, Martha thought of her daughter. They parked in front of an old warehouse. Michael observed the building through binoculars and whispered, "There's movement inside. Let's approach carefully." The trio quietly moved towards the warehouse, staying close to the walls. Peering through a window, they saw several men and women discussing something. Suddenly, Martha gasped. Among them was a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Rebecca. "Rebecca," she murmured. At the same moment, Jason's eyes widened. "Amy?" Michael quickly pulled them back into hiding. "Stay quiet. It's dangerous." Just then, a loud noise came from inside the warehouse, followed by shouts and the sound of running feet. Michael made a quick decision. "We need to get out of here now." They hurried back to their car. As Michael started the engine, several men burst out of the warehouse. "Who are you?" one of the men shouted. Michael pressed the accelerator, and the car sped away. They could hear the sounds of pursuit, but they managed to lose them. Once they reached a safe location, they all took a moment to catch their breaths. "Was that really Rebecca and Amy?" Martha asked, her voice shaking. Jason was also in disbelief. "Are they alive?" "But why?" Michael looked at them seriously. "This confirms one thing for sure. There's a significant secret surrounding the disappearances of Rebecca and Amy. And there are people willing to protect that secret at all costs." In the car, a heavy silence fell as they all realized the path to uncovering the truth would be more perilous and complicated than they had imagined. But there was no turning back now. They needed to move forward to uncover the truth and possibly reclaim their loved ones. A few days after that night, the atmosphere in Martha's living room was tense as she, Jason, and Michael gathered to discuss their next steps. "Was that really them we saw that night?" Martha asked, staring out the window, her expression a mix of hope and anxiety. Jason sat uneasily. "If it was them, why would they be hiding? They have no reason to run from us." Michael chose his words carefully. "We definitely saw women who looked very much like them. But I can't be 100% sure. However, this is an important lead." Michael was looking at photos and newspaper articles pinned to his notes. They were all connected with red threads, outlining the puzzle of Rebecca and Amy's disappearances. Suddenly, a soft ping from his laptop indicated an encrypted message on a channel that should never be used unless in emergencies. After reading the message, Michael's expression changed dramatically. It mentioned a location he had been monitoring for years, a corner of the harbor occasionally used by criminal elements for significant dealings. Quickly, he dialed an encrypted number. After a few seconds, a faint voice responded. The schedule has been moved up. They're making their move. The voice continued in a whisper. But be careful, it could be a trap. The call abruptly cut off. Michael sighed deeply and looked out the window as the sun began to set. He turned back to Martha and Jason with determination. There's new information. We might know where your daughters are. Martha and Jason looked at each other. We should go, right? We must. If Rebecca and Amy are really there, we have to help them. However, contrary to their resolve, Michael warned them. It's going to be very dangerous. We are amateurs, and we might be dealing with dangerous people. But Martha and Jason were resolute. For my daughter, I'm willing to take any risk. I'd do anything for Amy and Justin too. Michael sighed. All right. But please, follow my lead. If I say we run immediately. That night, they headed to the harbor with the information Michael had gathered, acting more cautiously than ever. Michael brought a small camera and a bug to gather as much evidence as possible. As they approached a warehouse at a corner of the harbor, voices could be heard from inside. Michael started recording the conversation using the bug. Suddenly, Martha gasped. That voice. Rebecca. Indeed, a woman's voice, similar to Rebecca's, was heard. Are the documents ready? We don't have much time. Another woman replied. Just a bit more. But, are you sure this is safe? Hearing this, Martha looked at Jason, who, from his expression, recognized it as Amy's voice. Michael signaled them to be quiet. They held their breath and tried to listen more closely. Suddenly, a sharp metallic sound echoed from the back of the warehouse, followed by the rapid approach of multiple footsteps. Michael quickly assessed the situation. It's an ambush. Hurry. He swiftly pulled Martha and Jason toward an emergency exit at the back of the warehouse. As they opened the door, the cold night air hit their faces. Where's the car? Jason asked, out of breath. Not here. Michael replied, quickly scanning the surroundings. It's hidden in another location. Just run. The three of them dashed through the dark alley. They could hear shouts behind them, indicating their pursuers were closing in. Despite being out of breath, Martha kept running forward, her daughters' names echoing in her mind. Rebecca. Amy. Jason looked back. Damn, they're catching up. There. Michael shouted, pointing to an old warehouse at the end of the alley. Get inside. With their last bit of strength, they managed to slip into the warehouse. Michael quickly shut the door and secured it with a metal rod found nearby. We should be safe here, for a while. Michael said, catching his breath. In the darkness, the three of them could only catch their breath for a while. Outside, the voices of their pursuers came and went. Once it seemed quiet, Martha asked in a low voice. Was that really them? Jason leaned against the wall and replied. Yes, I'm certain. It was Amy's voice. But why such a conversation? Michael cautiously checked outside the window and said. They're involved in something. And it might be a much bigger issue than we imagined. In the dark, the three exchanged looks, a mix of fear and determination in their eyes. What do we do now? Martha asked with a trembling voice. Michael took a deep breath and responded. First, we need to get out of here safely. Then, we need to find Rebecca and Amy and uncover the truth. We have to rescue them, no matter what. That's our mission. Martha renewed her determination. That's right. There's no turning back now. Michael played the recorded audio. Voices similar to Rebecca and Amy's discussed some documents and expressed concerns about safety. This is definitely evidence of their involvement in illegal activities. Michael said with a serious look. But why they are involved, we still don't know. Martha stared out the window. Rebecca, what are you doing? Why won't you ask us for help? Jason was just as confused. Amy, why won't you come home? Justin is waiting for his mom. Michael put his hand on their shoulders as they all looked at each other, recommitting to their cause. The path to the truth had become even more dangerous, but they couldn't turn back now. They needed to move forward to save their loved ones. That night, as Martha and Jason headed back to their respective homes, they spoke to their loved ones in their hearts. Hang on. We will save you. A few days later, Michael called Martha and Jason to his office. His expression indicated that he had made an important discovery. I've obtained crucial information related to Rebecca and Amy's disappearances. Michael began, his voice filled with tension. Martha and Jason leaned in to listen. It appears they accidentally discovered evidence of a large-scale fraud scheme. It seems government officials and executives of major corporations are involved. Martha gasped. You can't be serious. Michael continued. They were gathering evidence to report to the authorities. However, the criminal organization became aware and targeted their lives. Jason clenched his fists. That's why they went into hiding. Michael nodded. It seems likely. They must have faked their own deaths to continue gathering evidence. However, it appears that the criminal organization suspected they were still alive and has been tracking them. Martha covered her face with trembling hands. Oh, Rebecca, why didn't you tell me? And Amy, they must have decided to shoulder everything on their own. They probably couldn't share the truth with anyone, to protect their loved ones. A heavy silence fell in the room. Martha and Jason imagined the terrifying situation their daughters faced and felt profound pain. However, this makes things more dangerous now. The criminal organization might be aware of our investigation. At Michael's words, Martha and Jason looked up. Are we in danger too? Martha asked. Michael responded with a stern look. It's possible. That's why we must choose our next actions carefully. Jason's resolve hardened. But we can't turn back now. We have to save Amy and Rebecca. Yes. If our daughters are in danger, it's up to us to help them. Martha said, raising her voice. Michael looked at their determination and nodded deeply. Understood. Let's plan our next steps, but we need to act with utmost caution. Late that night, the three of them carefully made their plans. Michael used his connections to try to pinpoint Rebecca and Amy's whereabouts. Martha and Jason decided to search again for any clues their daughters might have left behind. The next day, Martha searched every corner of the house. Old albums, the backs of drawers, behind bookshelves, but no new clues were found. Just as she was about to give up, Martha stumbled upon Rebecca's old laptop. It was password protected, but Martha tried using her daughter's birthday, and the screen unlocked. Shocked and excited, Martha immediately called Michael. Michael, I've found Rebecca's laptop. There might be important information on it. Michael rushed over and started examining the laptop with an expert's eye. After a while, he discovered a significant folder. Here it is, he said. It looks like the evidence Rebecca was gathering. Records of financial transactions, audio files of secret meetings. This is big. Jason joined them, and the three reviewed the files. They contained details of a massive fraud scheme involving government officials and corporate executives. This is why Rebecca and Amy were targeted. Martha murmured. Michael said with a grave expression. This information is extremely dangerous. But it might be what we need to save them. Suddenly, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the room. Smoke began to fill the space. It's tear gas. Michael shouted. Hurry, we need to get out of here. The three grabbed the laptop and rushed out of the house. Outside, a black SUV was waiting. Michael made a snap decision and jumped into his car. Follow me. Martha and Jason scrambled into the vehicle, and the car sped away with the sounds of pursuit behind them. Who are they? Martha asked, trembling with fear. They're probably the same people chasing Rebecca and Amy. Michael answered. They must have noticed our investigation. Jason looked back. They're still on us. Michael skillfully maneuvered the car, weaving through the city's narrow alleys and occasionally running red lights. Should we call the police? Jason suggested. Michael shook his head. Not yet. There's a chance that people inside the police are involved. We can't trust anyone right now. After a tense car chase, they managed to shake off their pursuers. Michael drove to a safe house he had in the suburbs. Once they arrived safely, the three let out a deep breath. What do we do now? Martha asked, her voice shaky. Michael answered with a serious look. There's no going back. We're in the same position as Rebecca and Amy now. To uncover the truth and save them, we need to go into hiding ourselves. But what about Justin? I can't involve him in this danger. We'll leave him with someone we can trust. And we need to resolve this situation as quickly as possible. Martha looked out of the dusty window of the old warehouse. The sky was beginning to brighten before dawn. She sighed deeply and gazed at a photo of her daughter she had been clutching. Rebecca. She murmured. I miss your smile. Jason was sitting in the corner, staring at his smartphone screen, which displayed a photo of Amy and Justin smiling. Are we doing the right thing? He looked uncertainly at Michael. Michael, while cautiously checking outside, nodded. It's not an easy path. But we have no other choice than to reveal the truth and rescue them. Martha put the photo in her pocket and turned back to them with a determined expression. We can overcome this if we're together. Jason stood up, stretching his shoulders. Right. For our family, let's do everything we can. Michael offered a small smile. I admire both of your courage. Now, the real challenge begins. He took out a map from his backpack, and the three of them leaned over to look. This is our next destination. Michael pointed on the map. According to an informant, it might be possible to pick up Rebecca and Amy's trail here. Martha and Jason looked at each other, then nodded. Let's go. Martha said. For our daughters, and for the truth. The three quietly left the warehouse and began walking through the morning mist. They faced a long and dangerous road ahead, but a light of hope was kindled in their hearts. At Michael's safe house, Martha, Jason, and Michael were planning their next move. Information from Rebecca's laptop had become a powerful weapon for them, though it also brought great risk. If we can get this information to the right authorities, we should be able to prove Rebecca and Amy's innocence. Jason suggested. Michael answered cautiously. That's true, but the problem is knowing whom we can trust. This fraud scheme involves high-ranking government officials. One wrong step and we could end up like them. Martha sighed deeply. But we have to do something. Rebecca and Amy must be waiting for our help somewhere. Suddenly, Michael's cell phone rang. He answered the call carefully. Yes, understood. We'll head there right away. After hanging up the phone, Michael looked at the two of them. A trustworthy informant has just informed me of Rebecca and Amy's location. Martha and Jason's eyes widened with surprise and hope. Really? Martha gasped. Michael nodded. Yes. But there's no time to waste. They're about to move again. We have to try to make contact tonight. They immediately began preparing. Michael gathered necessary equipment and taught Martha and Jason some basic self-defense techniques. As night fell, they quietly got into the car. The destination was an old industrial area on the outskirts of New York. There it is. Michael pointed to a dimly lit building. Be careful. There might still be others around. The trio approached the building cautiously. Michael, leading the way, used night vision goggles to check the surroundings. Suddenly, they heard noises inside the building. Martha held her breath, and Jason tensed up. Michael quietly opened the door and entered. Martha and Jason followed him cautiously. As they moved deeper into the dimly lit interior, they saw light leaking from a room at the end of the corridor. Michael signaled them to wait and approached the room alone. When he opened the door, "Don't move," Shockingly, the voice belonged to Rebecca. She was standing there, gun in hand, with Amy by her side. "Rebecca!" Martha cried out. "Mom?" Rebecca lowered her gun in surprise. "Why are you here?" Amy, equally stunned, looked at Jason. "Jason." Michael intervened to calm the situation. "Rebecca, Amy, we are here to help. We've come to rescue you." Rebecca and Amy looked at each other, their expressions filled with confusion. "But, how did you find us?" Amy asked. Martha stepped forward. "It's a long story. But right now, we need to get you to a safe place." Suddenly, they heard the sound of cars outside. "Damn, they're here." Upon hearing Rebecca's scream, Michael made an immediate decision. "Hurry, escape through the back exit." The 6 of them rushed to the back of the building and started running in the darkness. Shouts and footsteps were heard from behind, their pursuers were closing in. "There it is," Michael shouted, pointing to a car he had hidden. Everyone piled into the car, and Michael sped off as cars in pursuit began to close in. "Hold on tight," he yelled as he took a sharp turn, initiating a fierce car chase. Using his expert driving skills, Michael tried to shake off their pursuers. "I'm really sorry, Mom," Rebecca said tearfully. "I didn't mean to worry you." Martha hugged her daughter tightly. "It's okay. I'm just glad you're safe." Jason and Amy also rejoiced in their reunion. However, their joy was short-lived as gunfire rang out from behind. "Get down," Michael shouted. Everyone ducked as Michael increased his speed. The city lights faded into the distance as they raced along dark rural roads. "We're almost there. We'll be safe soon." After a tense chase, they managed to lose their pursuers. Michael drove to a secluded safe house in the suburbs. Once safe, everyone let out a deep breath. "We should be safe here for now. But we're not out of danger yet." In the safety of the safe house, they gathered quietly in the living room. The air was heavy, and everyone seemed hesitant to speak. Martha sat on the sofa, gently holding Rebecca's hand, feeling her slight tremors, a mother's instinct squeezing her heart. Jason stood next to Amy, his hand on her shoulder, his actions a mix of relief at their reunion and anxiety for the story they were about to hear. Michael stood by the window, keeping an eye outside but also feeling the tense atmosphere inside. Rebecca took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice breaking the long silence. "Mom, Jason, and Michael. We're going to tell you everything we've been hiding." Amy nodded in agreement and continued. "We stumbled upon a fraud scheme beyond our wildest imaginations." The two took turns revealing the shocking truth about a massive money laundering operation involving major corporations and government officials, the details of which were slowly brought to light. Rebecca's voice shook. "We had no choice. If it was discovered that we held this information, not only our lives but also those of our loved ones would be in danger." Amy continued with tears. "That's why we decided to fake our own deaths. To protect our loved ones and to give ourselves a chance to bring the truth to light." Martha gasped and squeezed her daughter's hand tighter. Jason's face displayed a mix of shock, understanding, and profound sadness. Rebecca and Amy began to describe their life on the run. They moved from town to town, always on alert, enduring loneliness and fear while continuing to gather evidence. As they spoke, tears welled up in Martha's and Jason's eyes. "The hardest part was..." Amy paused. "Being away from our loved ones. Not being able to see Justin grow up, worrying you all." Rebecca looked at her mother. "Mom, I'm really sorry. For leaving you alone, for all the worry." Martha hugged her daughter tightly. "Just knowing you're safe, that's enough for me." Jason also embraced Amy, adding, "You've been incredibly brave. But you don't have to carry this burden alone anymore." Michael, observing this emotional reunion, commented quietly, "The evidence you've gathered will help bring down this massive criminal operation. But we're still not safe." Rebecca and Amy nodded, their expressions filled with resolve. "We have a responsibility to expose the truth to the end," Rebecca declared, and Amy agreed. "Yes, even if danger awaits." But this time, we're not alone. Everyone in the room felt the shift from oppression to resolve. A long and perilous road lay ahead, but their bond and their passion for the truth gave them strength. "Rebecca, Amy, where is the evidence you've collected?" Michael asked. Rebecca produced a small USB drive. "Here. Everything is on this." Michael took it and connected it to his laptop. "If we can get this to the right authorities, it should prove your innocence. But we must be careful about whom to trust." Suddenly, the sound of a helicopter could be heard outside. "They found us!" Amy exclaimed. Michael acted immediately. "Hurry! Escape through the back door." Everyone quickly gathered their belongings and headed to the back of the building. Once outside, a path leading through the woods became visible. "We have another car ready just beyond these woods," Michael explained. "We'll move to a safe place from there." The six of them began running through the dark forest. The helicopter's searchlight illuminated above them, and the sound of dogs barking could be heard nearby. "Keep going." Rebecca encouraged Martha as they ran, and Jason held Amy's hand, supporting her. Michael led the way, showing them the safe route, and despite their heavy breathing, they pushed forward for freedom, justice, and family. Once out of the woods, the promised car was waiting. Everyone got in, and Michael took the wheel again. "Where are we going?" Rebecca asked. Michael answered with a serious expression. "I have a contact inside the government who I trust. She should be able to handle this evidence properly." The car sped along the nighttime highway. As the sunrise began, Michael's car arrived in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Everyone was exhausted, but the fact that they were nearing their destination gave them new energy. Michael parked the car in a quiet residential area. "Here we are," he said. "This is the home of my contact, Federal Prosecutor Sarah Harrison." Everyone stepped out of the car with tense expressions. Martha held Rebecca's hand, and Jason placed his hand on Amy's shoulder. When they knocked on the door, a woman in her mid-50s appeared, looking surprised to see Michael. "Michael? What's going on?" Michael quickly explained the situation. Sarah listened intently with a serious face and invited everyone inside. In the living room, Rebecca and Amy began to give a detailed explanation. They discussed the full scope of the fraud scheme they had uncovered, the names of the high-ranking officials involved, and the evidence they had collected. Sarah listened carefully, occasionally asking questions. After the explanation, she said with a grave expression, "This is a very serious matter. However, the evidence you've collected is very strong. I have colleagues I can trust. Together, we can thoroughly investigate this case and bring those responsible to justice." Relief appeared on everyone's faces. "But," Sarah continued, "this will take time. And once the investigation begins, all of your safety could be compromised." Martha leaned forward. "We're prepared. If it means protecting our daughters, we're ready to take any risk." Jason nodded. "That's right. It's worth fighting for justice." Sarah was impressed by their determination and nodded. "All right. Let's start the procedures immediately." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and her colleagues vigorously pursued the investigation. Rebecca and Amy provided testimonies, and the evidence they had collected was meticulously analyzed. Martha, Jason, and Michael did everything they could to assist while staying in a secure location, monitoring the progress of the investigation. Justin was placed with a trustworthy relative, eagerly awaiting the day he could reunite with his parents. Finally, Sarah came with exciting news. "Good news," she announced. "Based on our investigation, indictments have been issued, and arrests of the involved officials and corporate executives have begun." The room erupted in cheers. Rebecca and Amy embraced, and Martha and Jason shared their joy. "Is it over?" Rebecca asked with a mix of hope and anxiety. Sarah answered cautiously, It's not completely over. The trials are yet to come. But we can say the most dangerous phase is past. Thanks to your courage and patience, we've taken a significant step forward. That night, they celebrated their small victory. For the first time in a long while, they could laugh and relax together. A few days later, a press conference was held. Sarah explained the scope of the fraud scheme and highlighted the courage of the whistleblowers who exposed it. Rebecca and Amy's names were not disclosed, but their actions in bringing about justice were emphasized. After the conference, Sarah visited them. "You're all safe now," she smiled. "You can go home." Martha hugged Rebecca, and Jason held Amy's hand. The long nightmare was finally over. "I want to see Justin," Amy said tearfully, and Jason hugged her shoulder in agreement. "Yes, he'll be so happy." Martha looked at her daughter. "Let's go home, Rebecca. We'll never be separated again." Rebecca leaned against her mother. "Thank you, Mom. I'm so glad you were here." Michael watched from a distance, a look of satisfaction on his face for a job well done. Sarah approached him and whispered softly, "Well done, Michael. We couldn't have achieved this outcome without your cooperation." Michael humbly replied, "No, this is the result of everyone's efforts. Especially the courage of Rebecca and Amy. Yes, they were truly brave. They risked everything for justice." The two of them watched the rejoicing families, finally at peace after a long and difficult journey. That evening, they all reunited with Justin. The little boy ran to his mother as soon as he saw her and jumped into Amy's arms. "Mommy." Justin cried with tears streaming down his face. "I've been waiting for you." Amy, also teary, embraced her son tightly. "I'm sorry, Justin. We'll never be apart again." Jason joined them, and the three hugged tightly, their family bond now stronger than ever. Martha and Rebecca, watching this touching scene, hugged each other as well. "We have a new beginning," Martha said. Rebecca nodded. "Yes, Mom. Let's walk this path together honestly from now on. The truth may bring dangers, but with the courage to pursue it, justice will always prevail." Rebecca and Amy's story proved this. And the actions of Martha and Jason showed that with the courage to fight for loved ones, any difficulty can be overcome. As the sun set, the two families embarked on a new chapter in their lives, free from the dark shadows of the past and looking forward to a bright future filled with hope. A year later, a barbecue party was being held in Martha's backyard. Rebecca, Amy, Jason, Justin, and even Michael were there. Martha, while handing out grilled hamburgers, said with a smile, "Everyone, eat up. It's been a while since we've all gathered like this." Rebecca, helping her mother, looked up at the sky. "It's truly peaceful days. Back then, I couldn't imagine such days would come." Amy, making a salad with Justin, nodded. "Yes, but we did the right thing. And it paid off." Jason, holding a beer, joined in. "It's all thanks to the courage of you two. And the dedicated efforts of Martha and Michael." Michael chuckled modestly. "No, I just did my job. The real heroes are all of you who stood up for the truth." Justin, with a curious look, gazed up at the adults. "Hey, when I grow up, can I be brave like Mommy and Rebecca?" Amy gently stroked her son's head. "You're already brave enough, Justin. But it's just as important to be wise enough to discern what's right." "That's right. And it's also important not to bear everything alone. That's one of the most important lessons we've learned." Rebecca added firmly, and Martha, placing the last dish on the table, nodded deeply. Trusting in family and friends is the most important thing. Everyone sat around the table and began to eat. Laughter and conversations filled the garden. Michael looked over the joyful scene and smiled quietly. He stood up and raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said. Everyone's attention turned to him. "For truth and justice," Michael continued. "And for the brave people who fought to protect them. To truth and justice." Everyone raised their glasses in response. As the meal progressed, the conversation naturally shifted to the lessons they had learned from their experiences. We have all changed, Amy mused thoughtfully. Through that experience, we have become stronger. Yes. The challenges made us grow. They made us realize the importance of family bonds. Then, Rebecca's expression turned a bit sad. But I regret that I worried the people I care about. Martha gently took her daughter's hand. You did the right thing, and we are proud of you. Justin, full of curiosity, asked, Hey, will scary things not happen anymore? The adults looked at each other, and a brief silence followed. Michael answered gently. There are still many problems in the world, Justin. But as long as there are courageous people willing to fight for justice, there is hope. Amy hugged her daughter. That's right, Justin. And we have you. You are our hope for the future. As the evening sun cast a warm light in the yard, Rebecca stood up and walked to a spot a little away. Martha noticed and joined her daughter. What are you thinking about? Martha asked softly. Rebecca gazed into the distance and replied. Just reflecting on our journey. What we have experienced, what we lost, and what we gained. You did the right thing, Rebecca. And I am proud of you. Martha put her hand on Rebecca's shoulder, and Rebecca looked at her mother, tears glistening in her eyes. Thank you, Mom. I couldn't have come this far without your support. The two embraced and watched the setting sun. Meanwhile, Jason and Amy were putting a sleepy Justin on the swing. The fight was worth it for his future, Amy whispered. Jason nodded. Indeed. Now, we live to leave him a better world. Michael stood in the corner of the room, watching the sunset through the window. He could hear the warm conversation of his family behind him. However, his face showed a mixture of joy and complex emotions. He sighed quietly and pulled an old photo from his pocket. It showed a younger him and a smiling woman, his wife, Sarah, who had also lost her life several years ago while pursuing the truth. Michael gazed at the photo and thought to himself, Sarah, as you wished, I continue to fight for justice. But sometimes I wonder, is there an end to this battle? He looked around the room again. The joy of Rebecca and Amy reuniting with their family warmed his heart. As the night deepened, the family and friends talked and laughed under the starry sky. They had overcome difficulties, clarified the truth, and, most importantly, reaffirmed what mattered most, love and bonds. Like the stars in the night sky, their hope would shine eternally. And that light would continue to illuminate the path for all who seek justice and truth.